Permanent Secretary for Rural and Maritime Development, National Disaster Management and Meteorological Services, Mr. Meleti Bainimarama. Commander RFMF, Permanent Secretaries and representatives of the Government of Fiji, colleagues and members of the Diplomatic Corps and fellow donor agencies, ladies and gentlemen. Nisam Bulavanaka, Namaste, Assalamu Alaikum, and of course, Kia ora koutou. Welcome everyone to the launch of the National Disaster Awareness Week. I am honoured to have been invited by the Ministry to join this morning's proceedings and to speak briefly about disaster awareness and the theme of this year's event, reducing disaster economic losses. As many of you will know and certainly appreciate, Fiji is vulnerable to natural hazards and disasters. The United Nations World Risk Index ranks Fiji as the 16th most at-risk country to natural hazards such as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, storms, floods, droughts, and sea level rise. And Fiji is not alone. 4 other Pacific countries, Vanuatu, Tonga, Solomon Islands, and Papua New Guinea, are also in the top 10 most at-risk countries. Climate change is expected to increase both the frequency and severity of these events. As a result, cyclones, flooding, and droughts are and will become all too familiar to many of you here today, to our families, to our colleagues, to our Pacific neighbours, our brothers and sisters throughout this beautiful region. In this part of the world, there is another context to the friendly names such as Winston, Josie, and Kenny. They are recent reminders of the threats that can be posed by Mother Nature and how these can affect everyday lives here in Fiji. Every year in this region, we are reminded of the need for greater awareness of the destructive potential of disasters and a renewed commitment to preparedness in order to minimise the economic and social impacts of these events and of course to prevent loss of life and loss of limb. The increasing regularity with which these events are occurring and affecting people's lives risks creating a sense of complacency or worse, feelings of helplessness. Cyclones, floods, droughts, these are commonplace. They happen every year, which might lead some of us to question, why should we be getting so excited about this, something we have to deal with every year? At the same time, others may be thinking that Fiji and Fijians are resilient people. We've all seen this before. And this is true. The people of this country have demonstrated great resilience in the past, most notably in the response to and recovery from Cyclone Winston in February 2016. Moreover, Fijians demonstrate resilience every day as they go about their daily lives, building careers, homes, families, communities, often overcoming the challenges of isolation, limited resources, and a vulnerability to external shocks. All of these efforts by everyday Fijians, through personal and professional advances, social improvements, economic development, this is all contributing to building a better Fiji. Fiji can and is taking big steps forward in these areas. And therein lies the nub of the issue. 2 steps forward, 1, sometimes 2 or 3 steps back. This is the risk and the cost of natural disasters. And that is why the theme of this year's Disaster Awareness Week is so relevant. Natural disasters have a negative impact on social and economic development. Disaster events undermine development gains, both those generated domestically within Fiji and by Fijians, and those supported by international partners such as New Zealand, Australia, and others. We all have a stake in this game. Disaster events redirect scarce resources from important public investments, such as roads, schools, hospitals, to response and recovery efforts. For example, in addition to causing the tragic loss of 44 lives, Cyclone Winston is estimated to have cost Fiji $1.38 billion US, or 31% of the country's GDP. That's almost 3 billion Fijian dollars. Imagine for a moment what could be done with that 3 billion, or even a portion of that sum, if it didn't have to be spent on recovering from a major natural disaster. That is why reducing the impact of natural hazards is so important, because it saves lives, and it saves money, and it creates opportunity elsewhere. I want to make an important distinction between natural hazards and natural disasters. We have very little influence over the first. Natural hazards such as earthquakes, cyclones or tsunamis occur naturally, regularly and across the globe. Sometimes they have little or no impact. For example, the huge, but fortunately deep, 8.2 magnitude earthquake that occurred near Levuka on the 19th of August this year, a little over 2 months ago, or the estimated 255 earthquakes that have occurred in Fiji in the last year. The cyclones that don't make landfall, the floods that occur in uninhabited parts of Fiji are other examples. These are all natural hazards. They have and will continue to occur, and we have very little influence over them, save perhaps our efforts to combat climate change, which is expected to increase the frequency and severity of extreme weather events. It is only when these natural hazards affect communities, livelihoods and infrastructure that they potentially become disasters. And that is where we can and must have an influence. It is a generally accepted principle that investment in disaster risk reduction before a natural hazard event can significantly reduce the cost of recovering from a resulting disaster. While there are mixed opinions on the exact ratios, a commonly referenced World Bank figure is that every $1 invested in disaster risk reduction saves $7 in recovery costs. Disaster response might grab the headlines, but it is disaster risk reduction that will have a greater impact on saving lives and preserving livelihoods. Because of its vulnerability to natural hazards, Fiji has much to gain from increasing awareness and strengthening preparations for the natural disasters that we know are coming. And that is where awareness comes in. The United Nations Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction is a global agenda for strengthening preparedness for disaster events and reducing the risks posed in the process. Fiji and many of its partners, including New Zealand, Australia, France, and others, are all signatories of the Sendai Framework, and our colleagues in the UN system here in Suva play an important role in supporting its implementation. Strengthening governance and management of disasters, investing in risk reduction, and enhancing preparedness are all key priorities of the Sendai Framework. It is encouraging to see that the government of Fiji is reflecting many of these priorities in its own plans and policies. But the number one priority under Sendai is understanding disaster risk. This starts with awareness. It starts with all of us as individuals, as communities, and as members of the Fijian community. To that end, can I urge all of you here today to actively engage in National Disaster Awareness Week and to encourage your friends, your colleagues, and your loved ones to do the same. Please participate in the tsunami exercise that will be run following this event, and I encourage you to take the time to think about what you would do during the real thing. We have a collective responsibility to understand the natural hazards that will almost certainly affect us and our communities, to recognise the impact these can and will have on our lives and our livelihoods, and to engage in conversations about the actions that we can take and the behaviours that we can change that that will reduce the risk posed by natural disasters in Fiji. This is essential for reducing the impact of natural disasters on Fiji and on Fijians, both economic and otherwise. Greater disaster awareness will help safeguard our families, our homes, and our communities. It will help protect the valuable gains that Fiji is making in terms of its own social and economic development. Fiji can enhance its resilience to natural disasters and move past the 2 steps forward, 1 step back scenario, and that requires a renewed commitment. To that end, I am pleased to be able to say that New Zealand will continue to play an active role in supporting Fiji to do exactly that. I'm delighted to be shortly commissioning and handing over the tsunami sirens that have been part funded by New Zealand, along with colleagues from the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ, Pacific Community and the European Union. These will help raise awareness across the Suva Peninsula of a pending tsunami threat. That is just the start. Our team at the New Zealand High Commission is working closely with colleagues from the National Disaster Management Office to put in place a program that will enable New Zealand to support a range of disaster risk reduction activities in Fiji. We intend to help strengthen Fiji institutions to deliver disaster risk reduction planning and activities, to reduce vulnerability and increase climate change resilience in this country. The aim is to help protect development investments and reduce the scale, the cost of future disaster events. We hope to finalise and launch this new partnership in early 2019. In closing, can I say that Fiji, New Zealand and many other countries, communities and individuals are on a journey towards greater disaster and climate resilience. We may not be able to control Mother Nature, but we can take steps to manage her impact on our lives and our livelihoods. And this starts with awareness of what could happen and what we can do to prepare ourselves. Anaka Vakalevu.
Your Excellency, Mr. Jonathan Curr, the New Zealand High Commissioner to Fiji, the Team Leader and Director of Programs for the Pacific Islands, German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ, Mr. James Forbes, the Commander, Republic of Fiji Military Forces, Permanent Secretaries, representatives of regional organizations and United Nations agencies, representatives of civil society and the private sector, members of the National Disaster Management Council. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the concluding part of another successful launch of the National Disaster Awareness Week, I would like to express our appreciation for your presence here today, and in particular to support this national initiative in raising public awareness on disaster management. On behalf of the Honourable Minister and the Government, I thank you all for actively participating in today's launch program. At the outset, I wish to acknowledge and thank the New Zealand Government, the GIZ, and the European Union for the substantial funding given to the Fijian Government through my ministry, which has successfully led to the installation of the tsunami sirens at strategic locations within the Greater Suva area. The ministry also plans to install tsunami sirens in highly populated and vulnerable areas in the western, northern divisions and larger maritime islands and on Vanuatu. For the next phase, the additional sirens to be installed still requires funding assistance from potential donors. We also hope to secure the assistance of local business houses for this worthwhile cause. It is the government's ultimate aim to install sirens in all tsunami-prone areas around the country by at least 2020. I also wish to acknowledge the technical support provided by the Secretariat of the Secretariat of the Pacific Community to the National Disaster Management Office, NDMO, for the installation of these sirens, which has made possible the best runs of tsunami drills that the NDMO has so far jointly conducted with our key stakeholders. I would also like to further mention the tireless support of our notable international and other regional partners, members of Fiji's intercluster groups, as well as the Fiji Red Cross and the Fiji Council of Social Services. Thank you all for your tireless support and worthwhile contribution towards the overall vision of government in empowering communities towards a resilient Fiji for all citizens, and the overall mission of building national resilience to disaster. Indeed, it is very encouraging to see a promising number of people, especially school children, who have made it here today, and more so to benefit from such a national event, and hopefully to use it as an opportunity to improve their understanding of the different types of natural hazards and disasters that threaten Fiji. This indicates to us at the Ministry that we all wish to learn more about different hazard types and disasters and how best we can prepare for these. We as individuals must take the initiative to improve our knowledge and understanding of the various natural hazards in our surroundings. This understanding will not only improve individual resilience, but also the overall resilience of one's household and community. Basic knowledge and understanding about hazards and disasters contribute to saving lives. This basic principle is recognized and promoted at the international level through the Sendai framework, where one of its 4 priority action is understanding disaster risk. The main reason for organizing this week's activity is twofold. Firstly, we aim to improve understanding of hazards and disasters, and secondly, how best we can prepare ourselves to respond in the advent of a disaster. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot reiterate enough the importance of having at least some basic understanding and knowledge of natural hazards and disasters. The theme for this year's National Disaster Awareness is reducing disaster economic losses. This is aligned to the International Day for Disaster Reduction, which focuses on Target C of the Sendai framework to reduce direct disaster economic loss in relation to global gross domestic product by 2030, GDP by 2030. Fiji is currently at the forefront of achieving Target E of the Sendai framework. Target E aims to ensure that signatories to the Sendai framework have implemented a national and local disaster risk reduction plan by 2020. Fiji has seen an increase in the number of natural disasters and experienced the most severe cyclones known to hit the southern hemisphere, which was Tropical Cyclone Winston, where 44 lives were lost and resulted in Fiji $1.29 billion in damages. The Fiji Meteorological Service has predicted 7 cyclones that will form in the Pacific region for the 2018 to 2019 cyclone season, with 2 anticipated to directly affect Fiji. Of the 2 anticipated cyclones, 1 could potentially reach Category 5 strength. The National Disaster Awareness Week program is part of our preparedness plan, preparedness prior to the beginning of the 2018-2019 cyclone season. The dissemination of disaster information today and those that will be relayed through the media are geared towards making us all better informed on hazards and disasters, along with the appropriate actions to be taken. These are very simple but powerful message that can make a world of difference to all in our lives and the community we live in. A simple message like disasters do happen, are you prepared? Should drive us to do an honest self-assessment of our preparedness levels. This National Disaster Week launch is a significant one because a live tsunami drill will also be part of today's program. For those of you who may not know, the last major tsunami recorded in Fiji occurred in 1953. 8 people reportedly lost their lives and caused severe damage to infrastructure. The increase in seismic activity around the Pacific region, coupled with the major earthquake and tsunami events, which devastated Indonesia, and Japan validates the need for improved awareness on tsunamis and likely devastating impacts. The tsunami drill will also provide the public with a golden opportunity to familiarize themselves with the sound of the tsunami sirens along with the evacuation routes. I believe all the participants involved in the tsunami drill benefited from the exercise. Lessons learned from the drill will assist your organizations in making improvements to your disaster plans and even formulate one if you still do not have one. I'm also aware that as part of the National Disaster Awareness Week programs, there are other planned activities which the NDMI hopes to conduct in an effort to raise the level of awareness in communities. This includes talk-back shows, ongoing disaster awareness training, and workshops in the draft National Drought Plan targeting the 4 divisions. Once again, let me emphasize to you all the importance of continually updating your knowledge and understanding of natural hazards, and both natural and man-made disasters. I also encourage you to sit with your families and formulate your own disaster preparedness plans within your individual households. Please be mindful that the resilience of Fiji begins with you and your families. Allow me to end with a statement by a famous Japanese geophysicist, Torahiko Terada, and I quote, "The next disaster will strike when the memory of the last disaster has been forgotten." With these words, I look forward to enriching and productive National Disaster Awareness Week ahead. Binasa Walevu, and thank you all.
Two, one. Please press the button to commence with the Tsunami Drill 2018. Just to advise you, ladies and gentlemen, the Tsunami Drill has commenced.
Well done, Peter.
There we go. It's live on TV. Let the Tsunami Drill being undertaken for the 9 participating agencies.
Class. You'll wait level 4. No, all together.
Headcount 10.